All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining me and my best friend Yandi here for episode 2 of Your Day with David. And I guess by the time that you guys see this episode, it'll be the weekend before Valentine's Day. So if you're single like me, you can come join us so that you won't be alone here. And hopefully, again, gives you guys a little bit of something to do on your Saturday morning or whenever you choose to watch it. Uh, but a little bit of background on Yandi. He and I met freshman year of college, just like last week episode. I introduced you guys to Drew and Sadie. Yandi came up in conversation as well. And I'll share the story of how we slowly became good friends. That floor in Linden Hall in college kind of was a quiet floor at first. I think when every freshman started there, the doors were closed and, no one wanted to interact. But I kept my dorm room open like a psychopath. And just kind of inviting people then, right? That the fact that the door was open, it just gives people a chance to walk by, look into the room as they walk by and maybe interact with me. And I think that there was one day, and obviously Yandi and I had seen each other in passing throughout the days there, right? We caught each other's eye, if you know what I mean.
Love at
And
first sight.
yeah, and I think I was watching anime or something like that,
I can't
and
remember what exactly you were watching,
it's probably like,
but
yeah, I'm not sure either at this point, but I know that where I grew up, things like anime were not common by any means, and so I think you popped your head in and you said, "Ooh, is that such and such?" I was like, "Hell yeah!" And that was just the start of a beautiful friendship where we kind of just talked and hung out a lot more, and um, and then back then, correct me if I'm wrong, you were, gosh, what was it? I knew that you had to take chemistry classes, but were you like civil engineering? What was it, Yandi?
yeah, so I came into Iowa State originally as like looking to get my aerospace engineering degree, but
Mm-hmm.
then after orientation, I switched it to civil engineering.
Mm-hmm. And then unfortunately, you had to take chemistry.
Oh, chemistry. Yeah, I had to
Yeah,
take it, but never really finished it.
yeah. And that we mentioned that very briefly in last week's episode with Drew and Sadie about how we got that apartment together sophomore year, and we got all the boys together, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
so cool, right? That March of the year prior, we're like, let's find an apartment together, let's move in, right?
Those are some
And
good times,
they were
man.
some good times, actually, some of the best times. Still very fond of those days. And was it really just that very first semester, sophomore year, where you decided to step away from school, or was it that second semester? That's a little foggy for me.
Oh, you mean like second semester freshman year
No, no, no,
or
sophomore year when you decided
sophomore year?
to step away from school.
Well, it's that's actually a funny thing because I think it was like it wasn't really a decision. Well, I feel like whenever I look back on it, it was more like a subconscious decision because like civil engineering really like wasn't for me, and I think
Hmm.
I think I think I knew that without really knowing that, you know. Like I think everything on the outside wanted to go through the motions. So like freshman year, I was kind of like excited, with a new environment, looking to meet new friends, and like at first it was just fun, right, to like go to classes and see what the college life was about. But then like once I saw what it was about, I started to skip out on the classes. It started early. Like I think like second semester freshman year is when I stopped going to classes really.
Oh wow! It
And
started
then
that freshman year.
it started really early. Yeah. There was even a point where like I don't know what I was thinking. I was really in like
Funk.
a funk. Yeah, a funk. Like a haze, kind of like I feel
Yeah,
like my eyes were like kind of like half closed,
like
like
a
I wasn't really
fog.
like thinking. Yeah, like a fog, exactly. But like I basically just let everything go and like I was um I got a letter from the school saying that like, hey, if you don't register for classes, you can't stay in this dorm. And I was like, oh shit, I gotta register for classes, like otherwise I'll
Yeah.
have no place to live. So at that point, I really only registered just to stay in Linden, because
Hmm.
I don't know what I was doing. So and then tried putting in a little bit more effort there. I got into like academic probation, and then that's when the summer hit, and I
Yeah.
had to like and then we had talked about getting an apartment. I think I look forward to all of that more than the school part of things.
Sure.
Um, so
I know I did. I
yeah,
also remember trying to. You did. The only time in on my life, and the only time anyone in their life should ever have an 8 a.m. class in college is their freshman year when they don't know any better.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I remember I had like a 9 a.m., but you had an 8 a.m. class. And the only way that I could get you to get up for it was if we went and grabbed breakfast at Four Seasons across the street, or
Yeah,
conversations over in Oak Elm.
I remember you would stop by every day like breakfast, and I'd be like, yeah, for sure. And then
Yeah, it ended up being like 20% of the time. I think I'd actually be able to get you out of bed near the end of that semester. And granted, there were a lot of times where I was too tired to be like, yeah, let's grab some bacon and eggs. Um, but so we decided to move in, and I remember thinking it was strange that we would all be hanging out at the end of the day sometimes, and we'd all be, bitching and moaning about our classes, our professors,
uh,
homework, all that stuff. And this is when I started to Sherlock Holmes things, right? I noticed that you never complained about school. I'm sitting here like, I was like, Yandi, Yandi, I never see that guy doing homework, man. Like that guy, he either. But this is the crazy thing was you would come to campus with me. You'd ask me what time my class was, and then I would take you to campus and drop you off at the school library first, and then you'd hang out at the library, and then because you'd be like, oh, my class is at 10 and mine was at 9, so I'll just hang out early so I don't have to drive or whatever. And so perfectly reasonable, and obviously I was more than happy to carpool, I guess. And but still, you should have been bitching and moaning like the rest of us, right?
yeah, you know what, like I didn't think that anybody really like was looking too closely, but I still thought that I did have to keep like an element of like I am going to school or I am trying, I guess. So that's why I asked you to like drop me off and stuff. I thought that was like enough.
Yeah,
But I didn't have anything to bitch about because I didn't do anything, right? So like
yeah,
I just thought maybe I just shouldn't open my mouth about this. I'll just stay quiet. But
sure,
I just didn't think anybody was like looking too closely to even like consider that. But
yeah. And and so what I did was, I don't know if I want to say confronted you, but I walked into, we were in our apartment. I swung by your room. I think you were gaming. I can almost picture the exact scene in my head. You had much less hair at that time.
like no hair pretty much.
Yeah, and I just asked you. I think I said, "Hey, Yandi, are you a part-time student?" That's what I asked you. I said,
Oh wow.
I was like, "Yandi, are
Yeah,
you
I think
part-time?"
I
And
remember that and I looked and I was like, damn, part-time? You're giving me way too much credit. Like
yeah,
like
no. So this
damn.
this is what you said. You're like, "Ooh, what makes you say that?" And I was like, "Yandi, you don't complain about school, man. Like, I don't hear you talking about your professors or your homework, any of that stuff." And you're like, ah, you caught me, man. I'm only taking like 2 classes, right? You said something like that. I was like, oh, dude, no, that's cool, man. I get it. Just part time student while figuring it out. And I kind of left it at that. But then I was like walking away, and like 5 minutes later, I came back. And I said, Yandi, you're not a student, are you? And then I'll never forget your reaction because obviously you and I are pretty animated people. But you're like, it was all a lie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, it's interesting, right? Because I felt bad for a couple of reasons. One, that you felt that you had to hide that from us, right? People that I I believe were your best friends at that time, right? And we at some point, and maybe it wasn't us, but the environment just didn't feel like a safe place for you to say, "Hey guys, like I decided that school isn't for me. I wasn't doing well in school, and I think that I should explore other avenues." And I think that there's a lot of people out there, and maybe even listening, that are going through that or went through the same kind of moment that you did of just you know trying to find clarity with
Yeah.
what's next. you know and I guess, could you give me a little bit of insight once, or maybe just tell me why you felt like you weren't able to tell us that you decided to step away from school?
Yeah, so you're actually obviously you're not the only ones who felt this way. I remember when I got back home and I told my best friends back home um that I didn't finish, school. They kind of had the same reaction. They were like, "Wow, I can't believe you didn't tell us,"
Yeah.
And I think that's what really hit me. I
Thomas
think that's
Burke.
yeah, the homies, right?
The
Thomas, Burke,
homies.
Nate, Rudy, Joe. Yeah, all those guys. I grew up with them pretty much when I moved here from New York. But they all had the same reaction. They were like, "Why didn't you tell us?" And I think that's at the time, like that's when it really hit me that I have friends as good as I do, and that I was really lucky because there was a part of me that felt like you guys wouldn't care, and then I guess another part of me that felt um like I confirmed something like inside of you that knew that I wasn't like good enough, or something inside of you guys would be like, oh, of course, like I don't know. It just felt like
How did you
a little
think
bit of
we would have reacted? If you told us like day one, what was because something stopped you, right? But
yeah.
there's something that stopped you and said, I don't want to tell these guys because they are going to react in such and such way. What
I
was
was
that?
I think I was ashamed, and I thought that like I would just be confirming that I really was just like a loser, or whatever to you guys.
Mm,
Like I'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to school, and you guys would just be like, sounds about right, you know,
yeah.
like because I wanted to be better. I obviously didn't want like it sucked. Like it was a shitty feeling, right? Just like not wanting to do anything and like not doing it. It's like that like the two things collided at once. Like you're anxious about all the things you're not doing, but you're not quite anxious enough to like do those things.
Take action.
Take action exactly, and
Mm-hmm.
that definitely sucked. And like you guys were doing also like you guys were doing like to me like outside. Obviously, we're all dealing with our own things, right? And
Yeah.
like um you had to suss out what I was going through. But to me, looking out to you guys, like I felt like you guys were doing so well, and you guys were trying so hard, like because I heard you guys complain, and a part of me wanted to complain, but because you guys knew at least what you guys were complaining about, like you knew what problems you had, and the fact that you were complaining kind of had this element that you guys knew you guys would get through it one way or another, that you guys could fix it. I
Mm,
couldn't complain like because like I just couldn't like I don't know like I didn't have a plan, like there's nothing to complain about. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And
So,
and I remember the plan eventually got to be, well, I can't live in this apartment and not pay rent, right? Because you still stayed with us for I think the entirety of the sophomore year. Um,
yeah, I stayed there for a year.
and so you decided to start working in Ames, um, selling door to door vacuum salesman.
Kirby vacuum cleaners. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that was an interesting dynamic too, because I think when we look back, it might have been a good experience for you, right? I'm not sure how you feel about it, but you got exposure to working with, I guess, adults that weren't in college either, right? So people that kind of could relate to your situation. You obviously, a, a very common thing in sales as well is exposure to rejection, which
Oh yeah.
you think about the idea of flunking out of college, like that's kind of a rejection in some ways, of like trying to reject that type of lifestyle, right? The college lifestyle, get that GPA and make your parents proud, right? And that's the thing is like, I think we grow up, we find out there's a lot of different ways to make the people that we care about proud, right?
Definitely.
And also, though, if they have unrealistic expectations for you, or the classic, what's that trope in movies? It's like you're the dad always says to the son, it's like you're throwing away your dreams, or something, and the son's like, no, dad, uh, I'm throwing
Throw
away
away your
your
dreams.
dreams. Yeah, exactly, right. And so I'm sure your parents probably had an opinion too when you didn't make it didn't make it through college, right? What
Dude,
was their reaction?
I feel like I feel my parents, like, thank God for my parents,
And do we
because
want to talk about your parents a little bit, like their background, how you came to end up in like Chicagoland area first?
sure, I can, yeah, talk about that real quick. So I was born in New York, uptown Manhattan, and my mom had me really young, and so like I didn't grow up I didn't grow up knowing my dad really. He was in jail most of my life. Um, so it was mainly just me and my mom and my grandma living in uptown Manhattan, and then my mom ended up meeting my now stepdad through work, and together like we had moved over to Skokie, Illinois, because that was like the headquarters where my stepdad was working. And so
Hmm.
yeah, moved ended up moving in 2005. So um, been here since fifth grade, and that's where I met all the original homies, and then moved off to college in Iowa, met the other homies. But but yeah, my parents are they're very like, in some ways they're not traditional, but in other ways they're still very traditional. Like my dad didn't go to college, but he had a very good job. I had always heard about like what amazing credit he has, and like how important it is to like, pay off your bills on time and just be very regular, right? And like he even told me before I went off to college, he was like, "Hey, going off to college is very expensive. I want you to know that you can either make it worth your time or you can have a great time, but like accrue like all this debt." Like he put it a lot more
Hmm.
elegantly than that, but I definitely took that other route. I didn't heed his advice at the time. But my mom,
So he told you that
yeah,
before you went to college.
he
He said
did,
you can
yeah.
choose a college route or you can do something else.
Yeah, because like it was this huge thing. I feel like my mom always wanted better for me, going back to that like I'm living your life thing, she always
Mm.
wanted better for me, right? And one way or another, I think she wanted to finish college right all the way, but because
Because
of
your
me, she only got
mother
to.
was an immigrant, is that right? Or no?
Well, yeah, she had moved here. Her and her family moved from the Dominican Republic when she was like 12.
Mm-hmm.
So she was born in DR. They
That's
moved and then got
that's
her
probably
citizenship
where that
here.
stemmed from then, right? Wanting you to have a better life because her family, moved to America to have the American dream, all that good
Exactly.
stuff, and
Yeah,
she busted her
yeah.
ass, right, to get to a position where she can finally send her kid to college.
Hmm.
And then so then you have two dynamics, right? Your mom wants you to have a better life, go to college, and then your dad much more say flexible or understanding the fact that hey, it's not for everyone.
He was a lot more practical. But it's funny because I think he always felt like I was his stepson, even though I love him to death now. Like he's my dad. Like
Mm-hmm.
I fucking love that guy. But growing up, like I understand from his perspective now. He always like, stepdad stepson relationship. There was always that fear of like, you're not my real father. Like he didn't want
Mm.
that to come out, but he wanted to raise me right still. So he didn't know like how hard to put his foot down all the time. I say all that to say that my mom was like the main voice. Like whenever it came to like disciplining me, it would always like come from my mom.
Mm.
And like I would know that like I let my dad down, but like the voice would come from my mom. So I think with that dynamic you bring up, it's very interesting. I think my dad, behind closed doors was like, I think it'd be much better if he went to like a community college, like stayed here for like
Mm.
2 years, like see what he really wants to do. Whereas my mom was like, he's destined for greater things. He can go on to university and do everything he ever wants. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think my mom's voice went out, and that's what led to like, applying for loans and really ultimately going to college without. The whole reason I went for aerospace engineering in the first place was because I took a career aptitude test in the seventh grade, and that came back with aerospace engineering, and I was like,
The seventh grade. Wow.
the seventh grade, I was like, that's it, I'm going for it, I'm in.
Imagine your entire career being decided when you're 12 years old,
It seems
right?
ridiculous looking back on it now. Yeah, like I can't believe I thought about it so like so hard. Like that way. I put so much value on that test.
Yeah,
But
where I came from, we did that military test, ASVAB, is that what it's called? Does that sound familiar? So
not really.
basically, it like tests your aptitudes in all aspects of life, and then but it's issued by the military. And then if you score really really high, then the military people are like, "Yo, come come join the
Come through.
military. We need smart guys like you, right?" And I remember I got
Hmm.
like an extremely high score on that, and I guess I was lucky. Not that there's anything wrong with being in the military. In fact, I have two siblings currently or were in the army as well. So, but it wasn't for me, right? So I made that decision
I
at a
definitely
at a young
I definitely
age.
feel that.
And I think there's been a lot of times, even when I was applying for jobs after college, where I could have gotten, say, a government job in finance. And there was just something about that where, I didn't want that for me. Even, my dad, though, he was a representative for the state of Iowa, so he worked government jobs and he's always worked with the government when he was an electrical engineer and stuff like that, 40, 50 years ago. And so, um, it's, I think one that kind of brings up an interesting point about standardized tests and how they kind of make people tunnel vision into, this is how smart you are and this is what you're good at and this is what you have to do. I guess when you decided, I keep saying decided, and you keep saying that you didn't have a choice, but when you decided, or that moment where you dropped out of college, what feelings came with, or maybe how did you get out of that, right? How did you get out of that? Because you said you potentially felt shame. Obviously, you didn't tell a lot of people about it for quite some time. I think a lot of people would have gotten stuck, right, in a rut.
Yeah.
And maybe for a little while you did, right? Um, how did you get out of that?
Well, I guess for a little while I was stuck in a rut, and to be honest, I the whole time that like I was in Iowa, I think I could be like you could say that I was in a rut, you know.
Hmm.
And it's such a weird like duality because like a few minutes ago we talked about like what a great time we had, moving in together, and I
Yeah,
definitely had like a blast. But like at the same time, I can't ignore that I've also had like some of my worst moments, when I was in Iowa.
sure.
That's such an easy way to classify it because like there's a time I spent in Iowa and then my parents brought me back home, and then there's a time I spent here where I was still in a rut, honestly, for a little bit. But
And for those listening,
um,
Yandi's now back in the Chicagoland area.
yep.
Um, he escaped Iowa.
I guess you could call it that. Like I escaped the idea of what Iowa was in my head.
Hmm.
But yeah, so after I felt a little bit of relief, when it was finally decided that I just did so terrible. Like I just like flunked all my classes that they were finally like, all right, we're letting you go. And I was like, thank God somebody made a decision, like because it wasn't gonna be me. Like I was just gonna let that ball keep piling up. Um, so it was a little bit of relief, and then there was like even more so of a what now. So I was like, wait a minute, I'm a grown ass man. I can get a job. And I thought the job doesn't even have to be all that great. I just have to pay rent with it, like and get
Hmm.
food. Like that's easy peasy. Let me go get this job. So I applied to Aldi. I remember I applied to there was like this like DVD like really like game store or whatever. I applied to that. Like I applied to like a whole bunch of stuff. But really like I guess
Family Video.
it wasn't Family Video. It was like a wasn't like a brand name video
Okay,
shop or anything, but
sure.
yeah, like on that same vein.
Hmm.
Um, so I got applied to all that stuff, and honestly, like applied for like a week or two, and then the fastest job that got back to me, was the Kirby,
Hmm.
the Kirby job, because they always need people. I've
Yeah.
come to find out,
After you
but
got
it
that
was
job, did the other places reach out to you, and then you had to tell them like, "Oh, okay."
not really, no, not really. But this Kirby job, it seemed too good to be true, which ultimately it was, but I did learn a lot, you know. I definitely learned a lot from that job, and I can definitely go into like more in depth like about it.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so like just we had to go door to door trying to pitch this vacuum cleaner. It was like a $2,000 vacuum cleaner, and technically it's a home maintenance system, so you can do a lot more. But I won't get too much into the sales pitch. It was ludicrous actually, because if you were a good salesman, you could really make a lot of money, you know. But there was still this element of it was a pyramid scheme pretty much. Like I th- they won't say that, but I think it's entirely like a pyramid scheme, you know. Like
Mm.
the whole thing, like they lure you in by saying that like they don't pay for advertising, instead they pay, you know, for you, and you're like the word of mouth advertising, so you get all that. And if you don't make any sales, you can at least make a good solid like base pay of like at the time it was like $400 a week. And you know, like that was enough for me, you know, like $400 a week was like enough to like pay rent and like get the groceries and to just live off of that. But the added bonus to that was if you sold more than $400, then you would get that instead. And that had no upper limit, right? You could sell as many as you want, and they had bonuses. So, like when they brought me in and I interviewed and I started training for them, I was talking to some of these guys and they were making like $1,000 a week, like $1,500 a week. Like they like taped up their checks, you know, up on the wall, like just say, you know, like boasting about how much money they made, and you know, and you can win trips, right? They really glam it up. Like you can win trips if
Hmm.
you just sell these machines, right? Like, and at first you're thinking like, okay, I can do my best selling these machines. And then, like they were really good products. To be honest, like these Kirby vacuum cleaners are actually really good machines. But the people who sell them are they're
Not
kind of
really
like
good
morally,
people.
they're not very good people. They're morally
Hmm.
ambiguous, you know. And I
Sure.
kind of hate to say that because I did make some really good friends there too. Like that's not to say that I didn't meet some people, some good, you know, some good people there, but most of them, like I would say like 95% of them were some pretty bad people.
So you learned some lessons there. You made some good friends. What eventually prompted the decision to leave Iowa, go back to Chicago, and live with your parents for an extended period of time? What drove that decision?
Yeah, so that was like over the course of a year. Like there was a lot of like highs and lows in that year because like I dropped out of school and then I got the Kirby job like a month later, and then a year later would be when I left to go back home. And that year honestly felt like 5 years. Like I went through some really high highs because there were some weeks I was killing it. Like I was making $1,000 a week like for a little bit, you know. So I kind of didn't mind it.
I remember
But
you took
the
us out to that steakhouse. What was that place called? That one day, like you sold 10 vacuums, you get this big bonus or whatever, and
yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
guys, I'm treating you guys to dinner.
Cause I don't know,
You're
cause
hyped.
that I was hyped, cause that shame
Yeah.
from before, I felt like I had a valid like reason. Like that's the other thing that job like offered me. It offered me like substance, right? It offered me like real like material value, which was something that I feel like I was missing value in general, you know. So to
Mm.
have like just fat stacks, just bah, like I was like for sure gonna take that, you know, as a win. And I didn't want to do something nice for you guys because I know like over the years like living with me, like maybe I felt like I was a little bit of a burden, you know, because I didn't always pull
Mm.
my weight. And I think I remember you guys talking about how I would always eat like the leftovers in the fridge, and that was just because I never had any food for myself, you know, sometimes. And like I would make sure I would just be like, hey, is nobody gonna eat this? Nobody,
I don't remember
because
that.
you
All
don't.
I all I
Well,
remember is buying buy one get one freeze from Jeff's Pizza, and
yeah.
and we would get the two 20-inch pizzas that would
So
last
we
us the
had
entirety of a week. So not like, again, there were leftovers, but I don't think any of us personally were like noted like, Yandi, really, you're gonna eat our leftovers? Like, because you would pitch in for that too. Um,
I pitched in when I could, but I think I built it up in my head, you know,
yeah,
like again that whole shame thing. Like there was shame in eating somebody else's leftovers, you know, and not being able to like buy food for myself. But um, where was I going with this?
eventually going
So
back to Chicago.
yeah, that's right. So yeah, so I did do really well for a little bit, and I got a promotion, and I think that's like about after I got the promotion, that's when things started to go downhill, because after I got the promotion, I really started to realize what was going on there, you know, because up until then I was just a dealer and everything was just a kind of a front, you know, like everything was a facade. They were putting up the illusion that everything was going great. But once I got the promotion and I had like an actual like an office job and I was put in charge of like hiring people and training them and getting these guys ready to go out there, I started realizing how like how messy it could all be, you know.
Mm.
And that's when it really started going downhill and I wasn't making as much and I was really like I had gotten lower than I've ever like gotten before. Like I think like I started smoking cigarettes, right, which at first was fun, but then just started becoming like a pain. Like, and then that's when my mom called me, like about a year, you know, after I took the job, and we had like a serious conversation. And I think I like told her everything because I lied to them. I lied to them for far longer than I lied to you guys because I guess the distance made it easier. Um,
Mm.
but I finally came out with it, you know, and they were like, you know, come home, it's time. And again, like I think I felt a little bit of relief then too, because I was like, yeah, it's time, you know.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of my life, like I guess a lot of my life back then was really just me going through the motions. And I said this before, but I was really just waiting for a decision to be made, one way or another. And it wasn't gonna come from me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So with school, it came from the school. They were like, "You're doing so bad, we can't keep you here anymore." And I was like, "Fine." And then moving back home came from my parents. They were like, "We see you're not doing very well over there. It's time to come home." And I was like, "You're right. It's fine." Um,
So for you, moving back in with your parents wasn't a negative.
I it wasn't because my, my my good friend Thomas really came in clutch because he came to visit us. Remember for like a weekend,
Yeah.
and yeah, I
And
had
I came to visit you guys too. I remember that.
yeah, yep. Um,
Skokie.
so that's right. He came to visit us in in South Duff in Ames, and we had a good time. But he told me, I think he told me later that when he came to visit, that he thought that there was something wrong with me or like off, you know, about me, that I didn't seem like myself all the way, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I kind of took to heart. And he told me when I was moving back home, because he was also like still living with his parents, and one of the highlights of going back home was being able to see him again, you know. And so I kind of told him that I was coming back, and thus like everything that came with it. And he was like, well, some people like we're in this point in our lives where everything we do seems like such a big step, and everything we do feels like it has to be like a step forward, you know. And talking to him, he said he's like it's okay to sometimes take a step to the side, and
Hmm.
that's like that really helped, you know. Shout out to Thomas.
Take a step to the side. I like that. I really do.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
know
that
that.
made moving. Go
Yeah.
on.
I was just gonna say. I know that a lot of people. There is that negative stigma of moving back in with your parents. That there's this feeling of failure, or that you're taking a step back. But maybe if we can frame it to you're taking a step to the side while you figure things out, right? Then it's not so bad.
There's no shame in stopping to figure things out for sure. And I think that's just one thing I never really thought to do, is I never thought that there was time for me to stop and like figure things out. You know, I just kind of like let things kind of like go with the flow.
Yeah. There's,
But
when I remember, because that's what parents are for, right? Depending on your relationship with your parents, you'd like to be able to say that they'll have your back when everyone else or the world doesn't. But you got to make sure too. At some point, you have to figure out what is healthy. Because from my perspective, I remember when I moved back in with my parents after college for a couple months while I did the big boy job hunt. And I'll admit, it felt a little bit like a jail. I got into a bad place because I was out in the middle of nowhere. All my other friends were either back in Ames, Chicago. They weren't in that town, and
you were coming from so much freedom too, like going from our apartment in South Duff, being able to go wherever, do whatever,
mm-hmm.
to being back home, somebody constantly watching over your shoulder.
Yeah,
Kind of, yeah.
and the same things growing up were still there, right? I could have went four wheeling or, God, what do people do? This is where I was at though, where I was like, what do I do down here, right? That I haven't done for since I was 18. Growing up to be 18 years old there, growing. Um, I think I always felt that I was supposed to be a city boy. As much as I love country music and stuff like that, there's just so much to do in the city and see bigger and I wouldn't say better things, but just more. There's a lot of people. I touched on this last week with Sadie, how Sadie never wanted to leave Iowa. Then she goes on a honeymoon to Iowa, or sorry, honeymoon to Hawaii, and then realizes that hey, there's a lot more to be seen, right?
Oh yeah.
And that was something that you and I talked about in college was, and we still need to plan this at some point, was
Hmm.
taking this big trip to Asia and just seeing a little bit of the world. And you've actually done it twice now, I think, right? Um,
Well, I've traveled twice. Like I went to China after high school, and then with my now fiance, we had a little Euro trip a few years ago.
yeah.
But we are planning
Well,
our own
no,
personal
you
journey to
went
the
on a
West.
trip with Burke though, or Jess and Burke.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that trip. Yeah, yeah, that
Oh,
that
okay.
little Euro trip. Yeah,
Mm,
we went to Greece, France, and Amsterdam.
okay. And then you said
Yeah.
you are planning a trip now with Angela somewhere else,
Um, Planning a few things right now. Planning a few things.
like a wedding,
Well, not really a big wedding. Um,
right?
but yeah, we're gonna more or less just get our certificate and then maybe plan something small, probably like at our house or something.
A
So
little
a
backyard
lot is
bash.
well backyard. Yeah, exactly, exactly. A lot has changed since moving back home.
And trying to think here. Tell me a little bit. I guess when I was in college with you, and watching you go through different relationships with people. I remember freshman year as well. You had broken up with a long-standing relationship, and we kind of worked through that as friends too.
Oh
And
my
now and
God,
now
yeah.
now that you have Angela, I mean, tell me a little bit about how dating Angela has changed you and how you've grown over the last. God, how many years has it been now that you've been with Angela? Three,
It's been like
four?
5 years.
Yeah. This is why I can't count. That's why I'm no longer in
Yeah.
engineering. But uh, time goes by fast. So what's changed? Right? What are some of the do's? What are some of the don'ts as you're now a fiance that you got to make sure you watch out for in your relationship?
It's an interesting question. So I think there's a lot of things that changed and a lot of things that haven't changed. The important thing with Angela, I guess I'll start from the beginning. We met on Tinder, and I've been on Tinder for a long time. At that time, I was on Tinder for like 3 years, I think, before I had matched with Angela. And Angela was only on Tinder for like 2 months or something. So that's always kind of a funny story. But
It's easier for girls, I think.
yeah, yeah, I think so too. But that's another thing. So
Men
we
get
met on
what they
Tinder.
can, girls get what they want, kind of thing.
Yeah. But we ended up going to meeting up at Starbucks, and the whole time I was like, I came in with it into it with the attitude of, if we like each other, then we should just keep seeing each other. Like if we like each other's companies, then we would keep like setting dates. I was just trying to be super simple about it, and she felt the same way, more or less. So we kept going out on dates. We kept learning more about each other. Um, and it just ended up being really nice. I was really lucky in this regard. She embodies a lot of what I don't, but a lot of like, and I embody a lot of what she doesn't. But a lot of our foundational like things, like it's hard for me to explain. Like we disagree on so much because our like outlook on the world is so different. But like the foundational things, like we get along pretty well with. Like
What's a foundational thing?
yeah, like I guess like we like respect, like we respect each other, like we respect each other's like opinion, like we always like hear each other out. And like when she just let me see here. It's like when we have arguments, we don't really like argue, like I'm right or you're right. We more or less argue like what could be right, And she has an idea of what's right, and I have an idea of what's right. And sometimes I can clash, but we have enough respect to each other, with each other, to be able to like hear each other out. And at the end, sometimes it could be like, oh wow, we actually do agree. We just came at it from different angles, and we met in the middle where we both agree. And other times it's like, well, I don't agree at all, but it's interesting you think that way. Um, so like, and I guess a foundational thing might be something to like more concrete, like I'm never really like good with politics, but pro life or pro choice. Like I guess we'd both be pro choice. Like women autonomy, like stuff like that. Um, but
You
yeah,
know, that brings up a or a good question, and there's so many things I want to talk about too with the time we have here, but and then not to push the issue because you just got engaged, just got engaged. We'll talk about that too, but you know, it, do you guys plan on like what's the view on kids like having a family like when you talk about
yeah,
foundational things that's a big one, right?
that really is, and we really agree on that too. Like both of us want to be able to live out our lives right now, as while we can. We're both like early 20s. I'm 26, right?
I
We're
think that's
planning
considered your
on
late 20s.
late 20s. Oh, you're right. You're right.
Once you get past that halfway mark anyway.
No, you're right. It's just I've been saying early 20s for so long. Now I gotta start learning how to say late 20s. It's like changing the year, when the new year comes.
Mm-hmm.
But so we definitely just want to live out our lives right now while we can. But we do want to have kids, and we want to like start a family. We even chose names like for for our kids.
Well,
Jordan if it's a boy, Maya if it's a girl. But
spoilers.
spoilers, yeah.
Hmm.
But we're planning like around like 30s, like early 30s to mid 30s. We'll see how it goes. The trajectory of everything right now has been going really well. So we're actually like super on track to be able to even have kids like in our 30s. Um, so if as long as it keeps going on this track, then that's just a matter of time.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And kind of one of the you know last things that I want to touch upon is the actual engagement, right? You and I talked about this not too long ago, because we hadn't heard from you in a little while. I'd say people get busy with life. Is my perspective on the matter where I want to reach out to every single one of my friends every single day if I had both the time, the energy, the patience. But
For sure.
obviously, reality has a much different path for us, which is kind of the reason for the podcast, right? Is for people that, even though I really want to connect with them, I can't. This is hopefully a way that they can feel maybe connected to me and see how I'm doing. Obviously, how I'm catching up with old people and how it's shaped the kind of person that I am. But it's almost the engagement was almost very similar to how you dropped out of school. I kind of I'm making a little bit of connection here. So for the people listening,
Wow.
um, Yandi and Angela have been together 5 years now, and I remember probably 3 years in, Yandi and I talked about the fact that he wanted to get engaged with her and like get a ring, and then we had in passing just kept saying like, "Hey Yandi, when are you gonna pop the question?" Or, and then at some point we just stopped hearing from Yandi, right? And there would be times I'd reach out and just see how he's doing, or but it was really actually when I was kind of telling you a little bit about this podcast, or no, it was just a night where I was in a bad space and I wanted to you know talk to one of my best friends, and so I reached out to you to see how you were doing, and you had told me you were already engaged, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
and then here I'm thinking like, oh man, I must have missed the Facebook post. I must have missed the Instagram post. But that wasn't the case. There wasn't a post.
Nothing
And
really.
And tell me, again, in your words, one, why there wasn't a post, which, by the way, I don't think that there's anything wrong with not posting. But then two, what took so long for us, the homies, to find out? Talk to me about that.
So yeah, definitely. It's really interesting you bring that up because you're 100% right, and I've never thought about that until just now when you brought it up. Like, this definitely is the same kind of thing, and it's just from different ends. One is like super positive, and the other one is super negative, depending on how like, if you how you view it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think honestly what it is I don't like to bother people. I think that sometimes talking about myself seems like, like like I could be bragging. In this case, I could be bragging that I'm engaged. Hi, I got my fiance.
Here
Oh,
we
come
are
on.
coming up on Valentine's Day. Here's Yandi all
Right,
stuck in
like,
love, right?
right. I don't want to appear like that, right? And then on the other side of it with school, I didn't want to be like I don't want to be pitiable. I didn't want to be like the victim. I didn't want you guys to feel bad for me. If anything, like I don't want to be like that marker, that outlier in your life. Like that guy who like I don't know. I just don't want to waste your time with it, for lack of a better word. If it's too good or if it's too bad, I just feel like I don't want to like bring it up and waste your time with it. So that's what this was. There really wasn't any announcement. We more or less kept it to ourselves.
And
We did
when
like
was the exact day you got engaged again? How long ago was that now?
that was October. I'll remember because it was the first time the Bulls went against the Miami Heat. It was sometime in October. Um, but yeah,
Because you guys, that was kind of like the engagement gift was you guys went to that Bulls game, right?
right. Yeah, we just yeah. So exactly,
To
exactly.
celebrate.
Yeah, because we'd been planning on getting engaged for a while. We literally like planned everything. So for those listening, when I met Angela, we moved into an apartment together, and then shortly after the apartment, we got a house together, which is this. We now live in our home together, and we planned that. And since then, we've been planning on the engagement. So like that came with like she had already chosen a ring, and I was just saving money for the ring. So really October was just when I had finally saved up enough for it, which not to say that was expensive or anything like that. It was really reasonable too. Um, and so I finally bought it, and then that was kind of like, oh my God, this actually is happening. So that was like the execution of it all. Um, but yeah, that was in October. Um,
So basically, we found out, or I found out, I was the first one to, I guess, that you shared it with me 4 months after the fact, pretty much, is what we're saying. And
yeah,
I remember you telling me a little bit on that phone call about how, since you had been so busy with life and the day to day of it, and you hadn't been able to reach out. We all have like our group chats and whatever it might be together, but you hadn't connected in quite some time. That if you felt like the first thing you say when you come back was, "Hey guys, I just got engaged," you felt that it was. I'm trying to remember the exact words that you used, um, but maybe that it was just a disservice to us in some way that we somehow wouldn't have been happy for you, or like, oh yeah, that's the first thing you tell us is that you're engaged, like, not even telling us how you've been and stuff like that. And but I think I wanted to make the record clear when we were on that phone call is like, we all genuinely want the best for all of our friends, whether it's friends that we talk to regularly or friends that we haven't seen in years. Now, I don't think that there's anyone that actually would have any animosity to that fact that you know some people just have to take time from away from other people and live
yeah.
their own
Well,
lives. And I think there's a lot of people that are listening that maybe there's old friends that you're afraid to reach out to and reconnect with because you feel like it's been too long, right? It's been too long since you've talked. You have no idea what's going on in their lives. They have no idea what's going on in yours. And yeah, you probably both are very different people, right? But that doesn't mean that that person doesn't want to hear from you, right?
you're
As long,
absolutely right, man.
I the only time when it's a bad thing is when you get that old friend that reaches out to you and you're like, hey, how you doing? And then they're trying to sell you on a pyramid scheme. You know?
Exactly. Oh,
You
this is
know,
why you called, huh?
they're like,
Oh
oh yeah,
God.
good to hear you doing. So, by the way, are you tired of working for other people and you just want to be your own businessman? No.
Give me $1,000 and you can
No.
own your own company.
Yeah. And then and then you don't even need to sell it. You just need to get 10 other people to sell that for you. Yeah?
Right, right.
No, I don't. And so again, for the people listening, something that I want you guys all to take away is the fact that you've changed too, but here you are, a changed person over time that does want to reach out to your friends. And so I don't see why you can't also put that into your friends' perspective where they've changed too and they really want to see how their old friends have been doing. But then, like Yandi said, someone needs to make a decision to actually reach out. And it wasn't coming from Yandi, right? So be that person. Be the person that reaches out to the people that you miss or the people that you care about, you haven't had a chance to talk to, and then just let what happens. I had a friend that I haven't talked to in, 6 years, 7 years. Reach out to me randomly 2 days ago, just seeing how I was doing. And I'll be honest, I had forgotten about this person and I missed her. It was just great catching up with her, and we're going to do our best to stay connected. But you just never know, right? You just never know how much you mean to someone else. So just talk. And
Yeah, very, very well put. Yeah, I think it's definitely important to just reach out because you can definitely get into your own thought loops, and that's what I did, right? I got into my own little thought loops. I was like, first I didn't want to reach out because I was doing, so bad, but then I didn't want to reach out because maybe I'm doing too good, and it's like, but that's not the point, right? The point is that like this is somebody that you made a bond with, you had a relationship with, and if you want them to do well, chances are they want you to do well. Like you said, we just got to get out of we got to get out of our own head sometimes.
so, Yandi, another thing as well that I brought you onto the show, as we're wrapping things up here, was there, anything that you wanted to share with, the people listening and watching that, we didn't get a chance to touch on?
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to say, thanks for having me on. This is an honor, especially coming from you, David. It means a lot. You're definitely one of my best friends, for sure. We had a lot of good times. Hopefully, we'll make some good times moving forward, with our future plans. But I love you, my brother. Like always here for you, whenever you need anything. And I know that if ever I'm feeling down, I can reach out to you, and we can always have that bro to bro moment.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. I think that's a good topic to end on. And I know that I'll be expecting an invite to the engagement. Probably not, but that's fine. I know, small thing, family. But again, for the people,
We'll do a bunch of stuff. Don't you worry.
sure. And again, for the people listening, as always, if you found that today's episode was helpful for you, or maybe you think that there's someone else that would benefit from listening, feel free to share the podcast. Please like and subscribe. And of course, if you feel like that you need a friend, come meet mine. I'll see you guys all next week.